Local gal here, so we're lucky to have her right here in the area. And she's going to be talking to us about trail nutrition. And I think she's going to save some time at the end for some questions and answers, because I know you folks are going to have some. So please give it up for Salty.
All right. So as you guys know, in addition to being a thru hiker, I'm also a nutritionist. And how I ended up here today giving this talk really started with a conversation I was having with Teresa last fall at the gathering. And we were talking about the importance of good nutrition for hikers and how to best spread that information to the community. So I've been writing some articles and then starting to do some more talks about trail nutrition. And since food is really one of the most widely discussed topics on trail, it makes sense that you want to think about your food strategy ahead of time, and it seems like more and more people are becoming interested in having good nutrition on trail. And that makes sense. It can give you better energy, faster recovery time, it can improve your mindset, more endurance, and it can even make the difference between a successful thru hike and going home early. So what we're going to focus on today is how your dietary needs change when you're on trail and why good nutrition is particularly important for thru hikers. And then we're going to talk about a food strategy that addresses the specific needs of thru hikers and the criteria that I use to choose trail foods. And then if we have any time, we'll talk about trail nutrition. I'll also be available downstairs at my table if you want to come ask me any more questions. And if you want to bring your food bag up, I can give you recommendations on that. And then I also wanted to mention that if you want the notes from this talk and some additional resources I'm going to talk about, I'll have an email sign-up sheet down there. So if you want to sign up with your email, I will email out the notes from this talk sometime next week, so you don't have to worry about taking notes or writing anything down right now. So let's dive in. All right. So obviously the demands of trail life are different than those of daily life. So it makes sense that your nutritional needs would change as well. So the next couple slides build on one another, and they really address how your hike affects your nutritional needs. So thru hiking is a highly stressful physical activity for your body, and most hikers are giving themselves very little recovery time. So often on a thru hike, hikers will be going hiking over a marathon a day, only resting maybe a day or two per week. And again, that's physically stressful on the body, and it ends up creating a lot of systemic inflammation. And so in the short term, that stress on the body can be positive, but over the long term, that stress can create chronic inflammation. And an easy to understand example of that would be lifting weights. When we create those micro tears in our muscles and then we allow ourselves recovery time, you'll actually build up the muscles stronger. But when we're doing chronic cardio and we're overtraining and under-recovering, as often happens in a thru hike, your body just gets worn down over time. And that ends up leading to a cascade of negative effects in the body, which we will talk about in a moment. And the important thing to take away here is that your diet can have an impact, either pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory, and it can also affect the length of your recovery time, among other factors. So your diet can really impact the stress that you're already putting your body under. So the next factor that thru hikers have to think about is that this depletion is occurring over time. So unlike other events where you might need to just optimize for a short performance window, with a thru hike, you need to stay healthy for month after month. So as we were just talking about, that wear on the body, that chronic exercise really wears you down. So it's not just thinking about the short term, but it's thinking about what's happening over several months. The body can compensate for short-term stresses, but when you're having continued demands and inadequate repair, which often occurs with a thru hike, you start seeing overuse injuries, impaired immune systems, disrupted hormones, and more. So how you eat on trail impacts your immune health, speed of wound healing, and speed of your recovery time. So that physical stress we were just talking about creates inflammation, which leads to impaired gut health. That can create a weakened immune system. You're then increase your susceptibility to illness and injury, and again, slower wound healing. If you maybe get a cut on your foot on trail, if you have the proper nutrients in your body, you can usually heal that up pretty quickly. But if your body just doesn't have the nutrition that it needs, that kind of stuff can just hang around and become a nuisance and even get infected. So that's another reason that having proper nutrition is important. As I mentioned, all these things can be compounded by a diet of processed food. And your diet can also affect your mood and motivation, which is something a lot of people don't think about. It's often said that a long hike is 90% mental. And even if you don't agree with that statement, the right mindset is definitely crucial to stay in the game. And having a clear mind for decision making is also essential in the backcountry. So why not, set yourself up for success by fueling your mind and your body properly. Our bodies need micronutrients and antioxidants to combat the free radical damage that's happening with all the stress that we're under. Before anyone tunes out though, I'm not telling you never to eat any candy bars. What I am saying though is just to be educated about what's going on in your body, know what your goals are, and know how to support your body for those goals. So it's all about just making educated choices, as we'll get into a little bit in a moment. All right, and so another thing that hikers have to think about is having consistent energy. So it's not just fueling for months at a time, but hikers are also usually hiking long days. So sometimes more than 12-hour long days of hiking and physical movement. So unlike other activities where you're like, oh, I just have to perform for this 1 hour where I really have to optimize my output, you really need to think about having consistent energy all throughout the day. And consistent energy really comes from blood sugar control. So as many of you know, with blood sugar control, when you're consuming only simple sugars and high carb meals, you get these high spikes in your blood sugar and then you get that crash. And a lot of us know this feeling of bonking or hitting the wall. It's when you're hiking up that mountain and there's just nothing left in the tank. And that's as opposed to when you're having moderate carb meals, when you're pairing them with fat, fiber, and protein, that's where you're really going to get that sustained energy, that slow burning energy that takes you all day long. So you don't have those constant ups and downs where you crash, have to eat more sugar, spike for an hour, crash back again. If you're fueling with a little bit of fat, fiber, and protein in each of your meals and snacks, you're really going to have that sustained energy that takes you all day long. And a useful analogy for this that's commonly used for fueling your metabolic fire is that of tending to a campfire. And that's when you think about if you throw kindling on a fire, right, it burns really bright, dies back out. You need to throw more kindling on it, burns really bright, dies back out. But if you get it going and then put some logs on there, you're going to get that more slow burning, hotter, cleaner fuel that's really going to keep lasting. And you don't have to keep feeding it constantly. So the carbs are like the kindling, and the fats and protein are like the logs. So again, if you want to have that consistent energy to fuel you all day long, you want to include the slow burning fuel of fat and fiber in addition to carbohydrates in each of your meals and snacks. And then I briefly wanted to talk about hydration. While water is obviously not a food, it is essential for proper nutrient absorption, digestion, muscle performance, and pretty much every other function in the body. So in addition to being aware of how much water you're taking in, you also want to be aware of replacing electrolytes and replacing sodium. I'm sure a lot of us have heard the stories in recent years of people needing to be rescued off of trails like the PCT in Southern California where it gets really hot and people are having problems with heat issues. So I recommend alternating plain water with low sugar electrolyte drinks and avoiding drink mixes that have an excess of added sugar and caffeine. And I say that because of the sugar issues we just talked about. Sometimes drink mixes tend to have so much sugar in them that they're really causing a depletion in your energy because you have that rapid surge in blood sugar, spikes, and then you crash again. So that's why I try and look for ones with a little bit less added sugar. And then caffeine, there's definitely a place for caffeine if you tolerate it, but just be aware that a lot of drink mixes do have added caffeine in them, and if you're not paying attention to when you're taking that in during the day, you end up disrupting your sleep at night, and your sleep is your prime recovery time, so you definitely want to make sure that you're getting great sleep, and just being aware of when you are drinking those drinks that have the caffeine in them. And then at the end there, I mentioned the symptoms of electrolyte imbalance, and then also you want to be aware of dehydration symptoms as well. So to know those for both yourself and to help other hikers who may be struggling with issues as well. And then before we move into a specific food strategy, I just wanted to cover a couple questions I'm often asked about trail nutrition. And the first of those is, do I need to meticulously calculate calories and macros? And macronutrients are carbs, fat, and protein. And essentially the answer to that is no, you don't. Often off trail and on trail, people say, oh, you need this percentage of this percentage of fat, this percentage of protein. And while different ratios of macronutrients can be preferential for certain activities, like consuming more protein when we're strength training, or consuming more carbohydrate for like the quick energy that you need for cardio work. Honestly, when you're doing an activity like hiking all day long, the specific macronutrient ratios are a little bit less important. The body is highly adaptable, and it's going to, once it goes through its preferred fuel source of glucose and glycogen, it's going to move on to the next fuel source. And I find that when thinking about macronutrients, it's more helpful in terms of thinking about consistent energy. And so that's what we were just talking about in those previous slides. So I prefer to have more fat and protein to start the day, because it keeps me off of that insulin roller coaster that I get when I just start the day with a lot of sugar and carbohydrates. I actually end up more hungry if I just start out eating the day sugar than if I start out eating the day with some fat and protein. And then throughout the day, I'll do a mix of all of the macronutrients, some complex carbohydrates with the fat and the protein throughout the day. And then I actually prefer to have more carbs later in the evening, because it helps restore muscle glycogen, helps with repair, and it also helps with my sleep. And I find that works best for me. And I think the important thing here is that you find what's best for you. So pay attention to how you're feeling when you eat certain types of foods or certain macronutrients. Pay attention to your body's feedback. Our bodies are these amazing instruments that are constantly telling us if we're fueling them properly. So pay attention to your energy levels, how you're feeling after you eat certain things, if you're hitting an afternoon energy slump, if you have enough energy to get up that mountain well, how's your sleep, all those types of things. You're constantly getting feedback, so pay attention to that, and you'll figure out the proper strategy for how to fuel for you. And then the next question that I usually get goes something like this. I've read blogs of hikers who eat boxes of Oreos and bags of Idahoans the whole time, and they finish the trail. Or if you've done a long trail, you might be thinking, well, I lived on 20 Snickers a day for 2,000 miles and I felt great. So what's the deal? Why bother eating healthy? And as I mentioned, the body's highly adaptable. So once it's depleted, it will use anything possible to survive. So of course you can survive on trail eating all junk food. But the case for healthy eating really is to gain the benefits that come with healthy eating, which is increased endurance, it's faster recovery time, it's just feeling better overall on your hike, it's having more mental clarity. You'll actually also eat less. There are studies that have shown this, comparing real food to consuming ultra-processed food, and real food actually makes you more satiated. So there's a hiker hunger where you're constantly hungry. I actually felt that I didn't constantly feel that when I was eating a lot more real food in my diet. I was getting the fiber and the micronutrients that were actually satiating my body. So the benefit of eating less is that you get to buy less and you also get to carry less. So that's a win-win-win. And then I encourage you to think longer term when you're thinking about the food that you're packing. So yeah, it could be a chance for you to just eat all junk food, but you also have to think about your recovery post-trail. If you're someone who wants to get after it on another big hike, or you like to go ultra running, or whatever it is that you like to do, you're going to recover a lot faster post-trail if you're eating properly on trail. You'll also avoid a lot of the health issues that are associated with the processed foods, like endocrine imbalances, the hormone disruption, adrenal issues. And one other issue I wanted to bring up about that is thinking about how what you're eating on trail, sometimes for up to 6 months, if you're doing a long trail, you're changing your relationship with food and your food habits. And when you're just binging, when you teach your body to binge on processed foods the entire time, it can be really hard to break that habit once you get home. Food scientists are paid a lot of money to get us addicted to these foods with sugar, fat, and salt. So that addiction can be hard to break when you get home, and has a lot, the consequences are seen a lot more once you get home and you're not moving for 12 hours a day, and a lot of people can struggle with that post-trail. So just be aware of that going into it, like, what do I want to teach my body to rely on? And I think any hiker who has eaten all junk food on one trail and then eaten just a little bit better on the next trail definitely has never regretted it. And then the last thing I want to mention about this, the reason for choosing healthy food, really goes to the mission of why I do this kind of work, which is the impact environmentally and societally about our food choices. As a community, I think we do an awesome job about talking about leave no trace principles, packing our trash out, and really taking care of these wild spaces that we love. And I think we often overlook food as an opportunity to also make environmentally friendly choices, and to really align our actions with our values. By choosing to eat more real food, we support a cleaner environment, and honestly, we free ourselves from the grip of these big food companies that really don't care about us, our health, or the environment that we care so much about. Everything is really done in the name of profits. So that's another reason that I think it just feels good to eat real food. So now that we have talked about what happens or what can happen when you're not getting proper nutrition on trail, let's talk about what you can do about it. And to me, like at the gear that I carry, the way I think about food is that it needs to be practical. So the reasons that I choose my food are the following criteria. So to me, practical food entails each of these things, and I'll go into these in the next couple of slides. But of course, it needs to be calorie dense. You're burning thousands of calories per day, so your trail food needs to be calorie dense, so you can carry the least amount of food weight that will fuel you. It also needs to be nutrient dense for all the reasons that we just talked about, refueling your body and avoiding those issues that can come up. And fueling properly can be the difference between successful